President Joe Biden's plan to forgive hundreds of billions of dollars in student loan debt violates both federal law and the Constitution, according to a just-filed lawsuit from the Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a libertarian law firm. This isn't how laws are supposed to be made, Caleb Kruckenberg, an attorney for PLF, told me. Only Congress has the power to pass laws and spend money under the Constitution. The administration's actions here are flagrantly illegal. So this is the first serious challenge to Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, which he announced last month, and we've talked about on the show exhaustively. The lawsuit's plaintiff is Frank Garrison, who's also an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Garrison borrowed federal student loans to pay for law school, but according to him, Biden's debt forgiveness plan will actually subject him to a financial penalty in the form of a state tax. So this gives him standing to sue the U.S. Education Department, his lawsuit argues. Quote, despite the staggering scope of this regulatory action, it was taken with breathtaking informality and opaqueness, the lawsuit claims. In the rush, the administration has created new problems for borrowers in at least 6 states that tax loan cancellations as income. According to Garrison, he is already receiving debt relief under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That's PSLF, not PLF, which is the law firm. PSLF is the loan forgiveness program for borrowers who work in public service at nonprofit organizations. So qualifying borrowers who make a certain number of payments and then meet maximum income requirements can have the rest of their debts forgiven by PSLF. Garrison expects to qualify in about 4 years for that forgiveness. Now, importantly, debt relief under PSLF, that program, is not subject to state taxes. Biden's broad forgiveness plan, however, will be taxed as income in Indiana, where Garrison resides, as well as Wisconsin, North Carolina, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Garrison will be, quote, stuck with a tax bill that makes him financially worse off than continuing with his repayment program under PSLF, according to the lawsuit. He did not ask for cancellation, doesn't want it, and has no way to opt out of it. The administration's slapdash lawmaking by press release approach to student debt cancellation threatens to leave tens of thousands of borrowers stuck with a tax bill on money they'll never see in states like Indiana, where it will be taxed as income, says Kruckenberg. Now, while the Pacific Legal Foundation's theory is that this gives Garrison standing to sue the Education Department, the lawsuit's case against the Biden forgiveness plan is actually much more straightforward. We talked about it on the show. The Pacific Legal Foundation is arguing that Biden has violated both the Constitution and the Administrative Procedure Act, which gives Congress, rather than the president, the power to make new regulations. Biden's new plan will forgive up to $20,000 worth of debt for many borrowers, and the plan could cost U.S. taxpayers anywhere between $300 billion and $1 trillion. A low estimate of the cost per individual taxpayer is $2,100. The administration has claimed that it has the power to unilaterally forgive student loan debts without consulting Congress. As justification, Biden has cited 2003's higher education relief opportunities for students, or the HEROES Act. So this law gave the president some authority to cancel or delay student loan repayments during national emergencies, with the clear intention of offering relief to borrowers who were serving in combat operations during the war on terror. Biden's view is that the COVID-19 pandemic counts as a national emergency, even though he has now declared it definitively over. Remember that?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
PLF's lawsuit takes issue with the pandemic-based justification for debt relief, noting that the harms purportedly ameliorated with debt forgiveness are not, quote, a direct result of the, quote, national emergency as required by the HEROES Act. To the extent the statute can arguably justify the cancellation, the major questions doctrine requires a clear authorization by Congress of such an economically and politically significant action, which is lacking here. That's from the lawsuit. Loan forgiveness is set to kick in, by the way, sometime next month. So we'll see. So there it is, Brianna. Here is the lawsuit that could potentially derail the student loan forgiveness. We've talked about the actual legal argument, and I think you have conceded that the kind of pandemic justification is maybe not the strongest case for doing this.
No, it's not the strongest. But part of the argument that I made then is that it wasn't and still isn't too late for them to simply use the other authority. So there's two things here. One, what this gentleman that you're referencing here is arguing is a case for standing.
Yeah.
So their claims are so tenuous that the biggest hurdle many people thought that they might face is even having someone with a claim that can be adjudicated in this context, a claim that is proximate enough to the harm that they can even have standing here, as opposed to people like Ted Cruz who just don't like the policy because they just don't like it.
Well, so what do you make of this very creative standing argument?
So I think, for one, because we actually don't have language yet, the same reasons that I think Biden should just use the 1965 Education Act instead of the HEROES Act, he could make that switch, and he could easily create an out that would allow people to opt out of this program, thus ending this person's efforts. It seems to me, I'm not, a legal expert on this particular area, but we're all talking about a policy that hasn't been enacted yet. And so when I was speaking to Florida Professor Jed Sugarman on my show about this, the point that he was making is that any claims would have to wait until there's actually, action on these kinds of policies. And until that time, I think there's ample opportunity for Joe Biden to make this as fair as possible for people. So if this person is going to be disadvantaged by the tax implications of this policy, I think that's a bad thing. And I'm looking forward to Joe Biden taking this opportunity for him to actually remedy that behavior. Now, what we know is going on here is not that this person is actually having a qualm about their taxes. It's about a broader effort to use a fringe case to try to take down a policy that is going to help 44 million Americans who are middle class and low income people who are too poor to pay to go to college. So I hope this guy brings some cookies to work or has some really good water cooler conversation, because he's going to have a lot of coworkers here. He does public interest work. He's taking advantage of a government program to make it easier for him to pay his loans off. And there are a lot of people in his cohort who I'm sure would be very much advantaged by Biden's student debt policy. So I hope he's a real charmer, because he might not be making a lot of friends at work right now.
Well, he works for Pacific Legal Foundation, which is the place. So they agree, ideologically with trying to prevent this. I think he would say, I think he would say that the loan forgiveness program he is using was authorized by Congress, is subject to democratic decision making, is the lawmakers are accountable to the people. So that's fine. What Biden just declared without any input from the normal lawmaking, rulemaking process is not how the Constitution thinks our government should function. It's not for just the executive to declare laws and Congress to be the pontification branch and the executive to be the sole lawmaking, all the functions of the executive and the legislative role. That's not how our system is supposed to work.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I wish that Republicans would come forward with a policy, any policy at all, to address this crisis that's affecting tens of millions of Americans. Regretfully, they aren't. George Bush is the person under whom the public loan interest policy was enacted, and Democrats were able to join that on a bipartisan basis to do something good for the country. Unfortunately, Republicans are in a place where they are unwilling to vote for anything. They're really unwilling to support a child tax credit that halved child poverty. They're unwilling to vote for any of the COVID relief reforms that came down the transom over the past 2 years that kept the economy going and enabled America to keep on the straight and narrow. And so, unfortunately, because of the failure of bipartisanship and the real rancor coming out of the right and antipathy they seem to have for student borrowers as a whole. I mean, you heard what Ted Cruz said about baristas and basket weavers or whatever being the central actors and the central beneficiaries of these kinds of programs, and we know that couldn't be further from the truth. They talk with complete and total contempt for the student borrower population. So unfortunately, we're not going to have a bipartisan effort on this. I would like to see it. And fortunately, there happens to be good legal authority for the president to act with executive authority on issues of extreme education emergencies, which of course we were in because of a crisis that has been created in part because of people like Joe Biden. So he can do this, he should do this, and I look forward forward to any tweaks that have to happen to the plan, as flagged by good reporting like yours.
As a crisis created by the loaning program. I mean, let's have Democrats put forward a plan. Again,
one independent senator from Vermont certainly has put forward a plan, and it's right there for everyone to vote on. So if you are a conservative that really hopes for the root causes of the student loan crisis to be addressed, you should encourage your representatives to go ahead and vote for Bernie's plan to make public colleges and universities tuition free, and we can get rid of this federal loan program that's really helped to raise the cost of colleges.
Well, and I think the income-derived repayment is a good idea, or a healthier way to pay for college than this, but not still with the middleman of the loans. Just make it generally true that you pay to the college some percentage of your income after you graduate for some period of time. I would be fine with that. I think that makes perfect sense. But right now, you're going to repay a loan that way. So we're adding an extra step that just makes it so the institution will raise tuition, will take all the loan money, and then you're paying your income back to the taxpayer. It won't be nearly as much as the loan was.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree, but I mean, the reality is that colleges are unlikely to agree to that, because under the current model.
Well, they are, because they have the loan program right now. We'll get rid of that, and then we'll let them fend for themselves.
Right. I mean, I think that the fundamental issue, if you value colleges and you value people's ability to get an education and you value having an educated workforce and country, is to have free, accessible colleges for all, not for us to just kind of, ruefully root for the destruction of the college system. Now, there's certainly colleges that I have no affinity for who have enormous endowments and don't use those endowments to support their students. I think it's unconscionable, frankly, that I have friends from Harvard who came from inner city neighborhoods, went back and became teachers in their schools, and Harvard is asking them to pay $40,000 a year for undergraduate tuition when they have, hundreds of millions, maybe more, in their endowment.
And we're subsidizing them.
Right.
Through the loan program.
Right. At the same time, I wish we did live in a world. I don't think it's right to say let's have policy structured as an attack on the education system, an attack on the education system which people like Ronald Reagan spearheaded in the 1980s after there was integration at these schools, and it was explicitly understood and explicitly said by so many conservatives that these schools have people whose politics we don't like, so we want to censor them and shut down their ability to come together on these educational opportunities, to defund the University of California system for that explicit political purpose. So I think we have to do both things. We have to support public colleges and universities so we can have true freedom of speech and expression, at the same time that we unwind some of the perverse financial incentives that have been set up.
Unwind the perverse financial incentives. I don't agree with you that it should be free, but it should certainly be affordable. It used to be affordable, and then we have all these policies that have made it absolutely unaffordable and immiserate people by trapping them in debt. Let's have policies that go back to where it was, where if you wanted the college degree, you could pay for it. It was possible to pay your way through it.
Should primary school be free, in your opinion, Robby?
Primary school should be free, yes.
And what distinction do you make between 12th grade being free and freshman year being free?
The more credentialing we do, the more there's no benefit that you can get by doing it over everyone else. It's just an extra hoop we add to society before you can work. It's actually destroying productivity by making it so it cheapens the degree.
I think that was a really honest thing that you just said, and I think that's a problem, that we understand that college attainment is a way to keep a kind of a class hierarchy where some people are better and more qualified and get more opportunities than other folks. And yes, it cheapens a college degree if everyone can have one. That's a problem.
Then it will be a graduate degree. Then it will be a PhD. Then people will be 50 years old still getting the next certificate, as long as we keep subsidizing it or making it free. There'll be no end to it.
I think that you have to go to college to get certain jobs. You have to go to college to be a doctor. You have to go to college to be a teacher, and that those kind of jobs should be accessible.
You have to go to college to be a teacher?
Yes, and that those kind of jobs should be accessible to all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of jobs you don't need to go to college for, and we're making it so that you do have to go to college for all jobs because we've subsidized it.
No, Robby, you can't make it You can't play those kinds of games. If you don't have to go to college for a job, don't go to college for a job, but also don't sit here and pretend that vocational school doesn't cost money, that people don't have barriers to doing that too. All of those things should be free. When we're talking about free higher education, it is also vocational schools, it's community colleges. This isn't a class issue unless you maintain that only some people should have access to the next stepping stone to do any profession that they want to do. It cannot be the case that only rich people have an ability to go to college and access the kinds of jobs that often afford the greatest remuneration.
It used to be the case. It was not only rich people who go to college. You could pay your way and you could make it work, and we should go back to that. That was great because the primary beneficiary of the college degree is the person themselves.
What's affordable? What's the maximum price that you see college? You anticipate college should cost?
Well, it should be the way it was. I mean, keeping up with inflation, you should be able to, if you work a job or if you work nights.
A lot of colleges were free or close to being free, nominal costs for some books and things like that. So if that's what you're saying, then we're in agreement. But if there is some performative way that you think that a college should still cost $12,000 a year instead of $60,000 a year or something like that,
that's a big difference.
It is a big difference, but unfortunately, we live in a country where 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency, much less $12,000 a year in tuition.
Well, all right. Here we had the debate again, and we'll have more Rising right after this.